Sure, why not? It's a topic I think that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. This is nothing new, really, Chris. I mean, the megapixel wars have been going on for what seems to be years now, right?
Ever since
Um,
the beginning of digital, so
yeah,
early 90s?
mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, when the point and shoots really started becoming popular. I remember all the way back in 2000 when I bought this little Samsung point and shoot. The megapixel craze was starting to kick off back then, and it's continued on to this day. And it's really just reaching this fever pitch point now, and it is definitely something that camera manufacturers just need to let go of because really, at the end of the day, megapixels are really not all that important. And I'll show you a chart here later on explaining why. But, every week it seems, Chris, that we get wind of a new camera that's sporting a 60, 80, 100 megapixel sensor. And at what point does it just become too much?
It's a little crazy as well, too, because I think that, up until 2014, I think that the megapixel wars were sort of justified because I remember
Hmm.
in photojournalism school, we had to have at least 5 megapixel cameras. And the reason for that was because we had to make prints every time we went to class. And they had to be a certain size, but I mean, 24 megapixels, we literally do the print tests.
Yep.
We know just what's possible. We blow things up to 17 by 22 all the time, and current megapixels are more than enough for that kind of stuff. So, I mean, megapixels do matter when it comes to things like dynamic range. I'll give it that, and a little bit of color depth, but other than that, I feel like there's way too much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to me right now we're at this 24 megapixel sweet point, which I think is more than enough for 99% of photographers out there. Um, you can print images up to 30 by 40 with a 24 megapixel camera just fine and still get excellent quality. Um, and 100 megapixel cameras are nice, don't get me wrong. I would love to have one just to say I have one. Although that leads into so many more different problems in terms of pixel peeping and things like that. But really, megapixels are honestly not that important anymore. You can go and pick up any camera. Last year, for instance, Chris, like the R6 came out with its 20 megapixel sensor.
You loved
Um,
it.
I loved it. It's a fantastic camera, but the headline grabbing news was, oh my gosh, it's only got 20 megapixels. Is this camera going to cut it, right? And, that was what was blowing up the industry about the R6. I got my hands on it. I used it. It's fantastic. High ISO is great. Dynamic range is great. You can make massive prints with it. Details galore. It's fine for just about everyone out there. Um, and sorry, go ahead.
I think that megapixels are also kind of going up so that manufacturers can compete in the video space a
Hmm.
little bit as well too. But I also really wonder if there are there's any bit of pressure from like the phone manufacturers because for example, Samsung does that thing where
Hmm.
it's basically like a foveon sensor and they upres, and I think it's like I forgot how many megapixels they say are on some of their cameras, but I wonder if because proper camera manufacturers do actually look at phone manufacturers with a lot of seriousness. I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
It really could be. And again, the megapixel wars span different industries, like you're saying, the smartphone. And the reason is because it's a fantastic marketing hook for a manufacturer to say, we have this many megapixels, our camera is this much better than competition A, B, C, or D. And it's something that the average consumer can kind of wrap their heads around, right? Megapixels means more resolution. It means supposedly better looking images, right? So it's a great marketing tool for manufacturers to throw out there and get your dollars out of your wallet.
Absolutely. I also think that there can be a problem with megapixels and lenses as well too. I
Hmm.
remember In the past couple of years, I remember interviewing manufacturers and being like, "Hey, you guys are refreshing some of these lenses very quickly." Like, there was a couple of years where like every new camera they came out with, they had a brand new kit lens,
Hmm.
and it was coming out of nowhere. And we were like, "Why is this happening?"
Right.
And they were telling us that the reason why is because megapixel count keeps going up.
Yeah.
So, in early digital, 35 millimeter film could still outresolve a lot of early digital, and now
Mhm.
it's sort of different. So, the lifespan of a lens isn't really like a whole decade anymore. It's probably like 5 years or something like that.
If that, and I think we had a conversation about this just a couple of weeks ago on the side, just between us, because it's something we had noticed, right? Yeah, lenses that used to be a staple in your camera bag for when I used to use my L series lenses for a decade or more before I changed them out. Now it's almost like we're making disposable lenses.
Hmm. And it's a little sad. I really wonder then if like, because like a big one, for example, was Fujifilm, right? With the
Hmm.
X100. When that thing came out, uh, it was a 12 megapixel sensor.
Right.
And I remember asking them about the lens, and they were like, "Oh no, don't worry about the lens in the future. Like we basically created this camera and the lens to be almost future proof."
Hmm.
They didn't exactly say that, but they were saying like, "Oh no, we tested this lens to be able to do really well." And when it went up to 16 megapixels, I started to see problems, and I think I was one of the few reviewers that was really seeing it. And then it went up further in megapixels, and the other reviewers were like, "Yeah, no, this lens needs a revamp."
Hmm.
And it was only with we're at the X100F now, right?
V 100V.
Yeah,
Yep.
V. Sorry. The F was the last one where like you really saw the problems and you really had to lean into the filters,
Hmm.
film simulations rather.
Yeah, I remember just how soft that lens was on the X100F.
Yeah, so they revamped it. And they were saying that they could have made it bigger, but if they did, then that would have meant that it was fully weather sealed. And that's why they wanted to keep it smaller. So they were like, "Yeah, no, if you want to fully weather seal it, you just have to put like a filter on the front."
Hmm.
And I mean, that's fine. Um, but I think that, it's all going hand in hand. I think that if they keep raising the megapixel levels, then also they're going to need to keep doing the same thing for lenses. And if that's the case, do you as a photographer go ahead and invest in higher end glass, or do you keep investing in lower end glass? And I want to equate that to flashes, for example.
Hmm.
Wedding photographers won't go buy very expensive flashes. They'll buy the cheap ones, they'll buy a ton of them, and if one breaks, they just replace it.
Yep.
Whereas studio portrait photographers will have like one very powerful flash. So, what kind of photographer would really need those higher end lenses? Like, for example, I don't own any G Master glass on the
Hmm.
Sony that's shooting me right now. I only own G glass and some that's not even G, and then I own Tamron glass. So,
Hmm.
like, I don't know. Like, I don't really understand why someone would need that higher end glass. What's the main advantage?
Yeah, exactly. And this really rolls nicely into how the high megapixel wars are going to start affecting you as photographers, because cost is going to start going up exponentially. Even if you stay with the lower glass, the lower end glass, the prices of those are still going to have to go up because the optics used in those cheaper glasses are still going to have to be able to resolve more megapixels to look sharp. So the price is going to increase as well. On top of that, I recently upgraded my computer, Chris, from an i5 to an i9,
Gee.
because I was running into issues manipulating files in post with an i5, which is no slouch of a processor. I mean, it's made it up to 32 gig of RAM. It's got, I've got a beefy graphics card in there, and my i5 was still struggling with files from an A7R4, which is only 60 megapixels, right? 61 megapixels.
Hmm.
Um, so I fired up a few old files I had from the GFX 100 from when I had that in from review a couple years ago, and it brought my computer to a crawl.
In what software?
This was in Capture One and in Lightroom.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah, it had a massive impact on it. So yeah, higher megapixels are nice. Going out and shooting with higher megapixels are nice. Yeah, you're going to capture more detail, but on the other end of that process, you're going to have you're going to have issues with your computer unless you start upgrading your computer, which is even more expense. So on top of higher price for higher megapixel cameras, the higher price for better lenses, you're going to have to upgrade your computer as well to even be able to manipulate them properly and process them how you want to do it.
And then hard drives as well too. I mean, I have a million hard drives in this
Hmm.
desk. And I mean, I have my RAID right over here.
Yep.
And you have to keep upgrading. I think I'm trying to think about other we're talking about bad things, right?
Hmm.
Let's be a little fair.
Sure.
Let's talk about also some good things about the megapixel wars.
Absolutely.
And besides more details and better color depth and better dynamic range, I can't really necessarily think of any. Like for example, with portraiture,
Hmm.
um, I put mist filters on my lenses sometimes when I shoot portraits, just because I don't need
Hmm.
that many details in your pores. I like to go back to something that I say fairly often from my old wedding days. No bride wants to see all the pores in her face.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
you don't
and
want
you're
to have to
saying,
sit there and post for hours trying to take them out either.
yeah, I know, and like, I mean, I don't know, like, I know a lot of wedding photographers really do sit there and do a lot of work in post production, but
Hmm.
you can get that time back pretty easily. Uh, by just like I don't know, sometimes it's using a filter, sometimes it's not necessarily using like the highest end lenses or
Hmm.
like the higher megapixel bodies or something like that. So,
Sure. Yeah, and the one benefit I can think of with higher megapixel sensors is the croppability factor, right? You can take an image, one single image, and you can crop in and generate so many more images from that one because as you crop in, sorry, you're not losing that much detail in your image. So you can crop pretty heavily and still retain a lot of detail in an image. That is one big benefit from high megapixel cameras for sure.
hmm but I
But
wonder, I mean, cropping makes a lot of sense for like framing later on, but
mhm,
also like I don't know how deep you crop, like for fun. Like, how often do you really do that?
not very often, to be honest with
Okay.
you. I like to shoot and get it right in camera and fill my frame because I mean I do shoot on a 24 megapixel sensor camera. When you do crop on the lower megapixel cameras, I say lower, it's still 24 megapixels. Good grief! But you do start to lose some of that detail. So I like to retain as much detail as I can in my images.
I agree with you. Years ago, when I was more of a working photojournalist, there were definitely times where I was using a 24 to 105 because it was my
Hmm.
bread and butter and it was so versatile, and a 5D Mark II, and I would need to crop a lot for my
Hmm.
clients, and that was quite a saving grace versus having to buy another lens or something like that.
Definitely,
Um, but I think we have more than enough cropping room these days. I could see it for like birding, you know?
definitely for birding. And of course, I don't know if you've used the new super res feature in Photoshop yet. Have you seen that, Chris?
I know about it. I haven't used it.
So, I mean, even now on 24 megapixel or lower cameras, you can basically import a RAW file into Camera Raw and you can res it to I think is it 2 or 4 times the resolution of the original file, which is just absolutely ridiculous, which opens up a huge door for massive prints and extra cropping room as well.
Does it actually do a good job though?
It does a fantastic job. it,
Okay.
it really does. I had to play around with it the other day, and I used some older files from just low megapixel cameras. I even threw a image in there from my Pentax Q7, which is a 12 megapixel sensor, and it looked fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean if you didn't want to spend that extra money on a higher megapixel camera, you could always use that artificial intelligence that's now starting to come out into software as well to help you get that extra detail.
Now, is it introducing things like extra artifacts or like weird sharpening issues or something like that? Because I've seen that with very incredibly digital based cameras
Hmm.
before.
I haven't seen a whole lot with the Photoshop implementation. It's doing a really, I don't know what wizards they spoke to get this done, but it's really doing a really good job. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed because I guess that's been around for a while.
Hmm.
Intelligent upres.
Yeah,
Panasonic's have that technology, Sony's have that technology,
yep.
everyone else has. I wonder why we're only now seeing it done so well in post-production software.
Probably because there are computers out there, even people with computers that used to be, kind of slow like mine, they can still do it. It takes a little bit of time to get it done, but it's possible to do it in home now, I think, with the computers that are out there.
Mhm. Hmm.
But I do just want to show, I'm going to try and share my screen. This is the first time I've tried this.
Sure.
So let me see if I can bring this up here real quick. Okay.
There you go.
Can you
Wow.
see? Yeah,
Yes.
that is bizarre. Let me cut that off. Okay, so basically I had a chart. Let me just read it off to you real quick, because I don't know how to do that.
Oh, you can set it to a specific Chrome tab.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Um, well, I'll tell you what, let me just bring this over here just so I can read it off. Because
Okay.
what a lot of people are going to say, for argument's sake, on the high megapixel cameras is when it comes to prints, right? But how many people really print these days anyway? And if they do, how big do they print? Um, you can use let me look at my little chart right here. At 21 megapixels, you can easily print up to 30 by 40 with excellent quality. 30 by 40, that's 2.5 by 3.25 foot prints at
And that's a
excellent
20
quality.
megapixels?
That's a 21 megapixel sensor. So the whole argument for, well, I need a high megapixel camera to do my prints massive, that kind of goes out the window. As you go up to like 50.6 megapixel, which would equate to what the new Sony A1, around about the EOS R5, you can easily print 40 by 60 images. That's absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely huge. If you go the other way, back down to a 12 megapixel sensor, which is basically what I was saying about my Q7 just the other earlier on. At a 12 megapixel sensor, you can print 20 by 30 with excellent detail still. That's really pretty impressive. Just to put into perspective, just what you can do with the megapixels in your camera. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I've only got a 24 megapixel sensor and I need to go out and spend $5,000 on a new camera to get more megapixels, or $4,000, whatever, is not necessarily the case. And a lot of the problems stem from post processing, right? We now have the ability to zoom into our images 100, 200, 300, 400%. And when you do that, sure, you start to see noise in your images, you start to see grain structure, you start to see the artifacts in the digital file. But you got to remember that that is the equivalent of getting a print like this and holding it at your face about right here.
Mm-hmm.
And who does that? Absolutely
People that
no.
go to museums sometimes like doing that.
Yeah, they can do that, but that's really not how it's designed to be viewed. Um, you
You
got
know
to
something?
understand. Sorry, go
Go ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead, man.
Um, I wanted to go back to the 12 megapixel point for a second there
Mm-hmm.
because the A7S III
Mm-hmm.
is 12 megapixels, and I
Yep.
remember you did the full review of that. And when you sent me the images, it looked like it was starting to break apart a little bit at 17 by 22. So I wonder what pixel density has to do with it, and like what you're saying right now with like the distance of like how
Hmm.
far you're supposed to be and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean that image I printed was 64 ISO 6400 as well. So I mean, you are going to see more noise in an image that's obviously a higher ISO. But I mean, normally you're printing out at what 300 DPI,
Mm-hmm.
and I've done some research and was reading about it. And really, images at 300 DPI usually have a perfect viewing distance of about 3 feet. So from 3 feet away at 300 DPI, the image looks absolutely fantastic. Um, you think about things like billboards as well. Billboards are usually printed at 10 DPI. 10 DPI, right? But then the average viewing distance is like a few hundred feet, and
Yeah.
it still looks fantastic, right? So it's not all about the megapixels. You can look at, I think it was Joe Edelman who goes around and prints billboards with his Micro Four Thirds Ollie cameras, and they look fantastic. So again, it doesn't come down to megapixels at all.
Absolutely. Just to reconnect with our audience, we have nothing here in the chat. On Facebook, we have a ton.
Oh,
Ed Book is asking, what about the ability to crop and still have excellent detail? That's what we were talking about for a bit.
yep, absolutely. It does play a big part. If the higher megapixel camera you have, the more you can crop for sure.
Yeah. I'm being told that my volume is lower than Brett's. I'm gonna try to boost the gain on mine. Am I too loud?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. Um, if you guys have trouble hearing me, please let me know. Steven is saying, "Hi guys, first time here. 20 megapixels is enough. Isn't it time to change sensor sizes? Like larger sensor equals more light." Hmm. That's sort of the case already because like I've shot with the X-Trans sensor and like a Fujifilm, the same A7R III that's recording me right now.
Hmm.
I've shot with I think it was the XT2 or the XH1 when I was doing this test. It was kind of informal, but at night I decided I would shoot something like a bridge,
Hmm.
and at the same exposure, the Sony sensor picked up a lot more light. So that's sort of happening right now.
Yep.
And that contributes to the dynamic range, but for what it still is, metering is metering is metering.
Hmm.
That's one of the reasons why we actually still do Sunny 16 tests with our camera metering tests. John, it's saying it seems like them and Gigapixel are doing great work. Oh, Gigapixel. That's something I haven't been to in a while.
Yep.
How can I clear my chat in Riverside? It still has my chat from 2 Sundays ago. That is a great question. I am not sure. We are still working on that.
Yep.
We're very new to Riverside. We apologize for that. And I know that new features are actually coming soon, so stay tuned. You Can Do It, Brett, by John. Totally all about the viewing distance. And on YouTube, James was saying hi. I heard that hi, John James, by the way. I heard that a larger sensor is better or more important than the megapixels. What do you think? I agree. I think a larger sensor is actually important. I think that it also depends on what you're shooting. Like for most of what people do as a hobby, and I hate saying hobbyists. I want to call us all passionate photographers. We really
Hmm.
are. But with that term, as I've talked about, there can be a hobbyist that just cares about what they do with their phone, and there can be a not passionate photographer that hates their life. So, for most uses, though, APS-C is very good. Um, I think that full frame is also highly capable, and obviously we know that medium format is very capable. But I think that in addition to what we're talking about here, sensor technology is sensor technology. I feel like these days a lot of it also has to do with the processors that are attached
Hmm.
to sensors. Um, and all those kinds of algorithms that go with it. Because, like for example, remember you were reviewing the Z50, Brett,
Yeah.
and that thing by far had the cleanest high ISO images I've seen of any APS-C camera out there.
And even surpassing a lot of full frame cameras too.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I was shooting up to 25,600 with no problems whatsoever.
Hmm. Um, I do think that larger sensors do matter. How much they matter, uh, I think that's a very complicated question. Like, for example, um, I was considering the GFX 100S and buying it. When I had it in my hands, I was like, "Wow, this thing feels great."
Hmm.
They got it really small, and then I looked at the lenses, and I'm like, "They're as large as my forearm.
Yep.
I don't want that." So, it's a very complicated question. Uh, I think that Fujifilm and Hasselblad both have to really work on that. Fujifilm, like, saying for a while, "Oh, well, it's very difficult to get lenses that are faster than f2 for medium format." And I keep telling them, I'm like, "But you're not even 645."
Right. Yeah. It's mini medium format.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and now them and Hasselblad both have faster lenses. I guess we're going to have to figure out a whole bunch of stuff with that because they could probably do smaller lenses that are fast. It's just there hasn't been very much innovation and research into that kind of stuff versus all the years that full frame has had.
Exactly. Yeah. Medium format is a platform that's really just now coming out into the mass consumer space. So it's going to be a working process.
Hmm. Looking at other questions. Ivan saying hi. Hey, we appreciate you.
Mhm.
And over on YouTube, no questions. Looking, nothing there. All right, yeah, and the chat here is quiet. We have 12 people here in the chat. A lot more on Facebook. So yeah, folks. I think we're good on megapixels now, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. Just don't buy the marketing hype all the time, guys. Just get the camera that's going to do the job for you, and just go out and be happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely.